scientists to figure out that the 49ers would keep Jake Moody, because as mad as that makes people, it makes 100% business sense. He's still under contract for 2 more seasons. Now, I was the one who asked John Lynch about this yesterday, and I prefaced my question with the suggestion that the 49ers should probably bring in some competition for Jake Moody. And Lynch did agree with that notion. At least he did make it seem like a distinct possibility. So I understand that people are up in arms. Jake Moody seems to be the punching bag for frustrated 49ers fans right now. I mean, he's the symbol of everything that went wrong in the 2024 season. Mike has even texted me saying that he's never seen the fan base so unified against a single player. And they're very unified right now against Jake Moody. If you go and look at social media, that definitely is the stance that 49ers fans are taking. But they're carrying this to the level of irrationality. They believe that the 49ers should cut Jake Moody as a sort of penance for their 6-11 season, regardless of whether or not that makes business sense. But with a 90-man roster, with the talent that Jake Moody has from a physical perspective, and given the context of why he struggled last year, it's very clear that the injury, the high ankle sprain, led to his struggles. Given all that, the very, very obvious path forward for the 49ers is to keep Jake Moody aboard and possibly add some competition at the kicking position. And that's what John Lynch talked about in his press conference yesterday. This is up on the San Francisco Standard. You see Lynch right there. You could see the headline. No guarantees. That includes Brock Purdy, but it also includes Jake Moody. Take a look at this. This is John Lynch's quote in response to my question. We still have a lot of belief in him, and we believe the injury had a lot to do with his struggles. We maybe kicked ourselves for letting him come back too early. That was an interesting line. It's really an odd injury. We've consulted soccer teams. We've consulted with everybody. The 49ers openly acknowledge that they are thinking about bringing in kicking competition for Jake Moody. They've even met with at least one college kicker already, probably more now that the NFL Combine has started. But this was back at the Shrine Bowl. They met with Miami's kicker. So it's been very clear that they are doing their research. Lynch, though, said that even if they do, they expect it and bring in kicking competition. He said, we have belief in Jake that he will rise to the top. Now, the injury is obviously the pivot point here. Jake Moody was 14 of 15 before the high ankle sprain. That happened against the Arizona Cardinals. He was on kick coverage. And the fact that the 49ers saw 2 kickers hurt in 5 days on kick coverage indicates that their kick coverage was lousy. And they've since replaced their special teams coordinator, Brian Schneider, with Brant Boyer. So that obviously has to get better. But the performance for Jake Moody was accurate, very accurate. 14 of 15 is good. You'll take that from any kicker at any time. After he returned from the high ankle sprain is when he missed the 9 kicks. He was 11 of 20, including that first game back against Tampa Bay where he went 3 of 6, knocked in the game winner, but not until after Deebo Samuel came over and yelled at him, and that led to Tabor Pepper stepping in, and obviously was a noteworthy scene on the 49ers sideline. But Moody never fully regained anything, even despite the fact that he did kick through the game winner against Tampa Bay. So the 49ers now, they've consulted even with soccer teams because they have been so flummoxed by the impact that the high ankle sprain had on Jake Moody's performance. John Lynch, I was surprised to hear him say that we maybe kicked ourselves, pun intended, maybe not intended there from John Lynch. We maybe kicked ourselves from letting him come back too early. So there's the 49ers acknowledging that maybe they didn't handle the Moody injury situation correctly. He only missed a couple games. They didn't put him on injured reserve. And then obviously they had the bye week in there, so that helped add a week. When he did return against Tampa Bay, he was not the same kicker as he was prior to that. But it's so important to focus on the actual facts of this situation rather than the emotions that fans are bringing here. Just cut everybody, cut the kicker. He's going to be the focus of my rage. It's so important to look at the facts, because if you disregard this injury and the obvious impact that it did have, then there obviously would be no hope for Jake Moody moving forward. And if he went 11 of 20 down the stretch run of the season without an injury, well, then you would seriously be considering cutting him at this point. But the fact that he was so good prior to that means that this theoretically is fixable for the 49ers. It's at least worth a shot to fix it if you're the 49ers, since he's already under contract. It's not going to cost you anything to keep him if you're San Francisco. Now, there could be downside here if Jake Moody continues struggling and you don't have a backup plan. And that's why John Lynch agreed with my notion of bring in kicking competition for Jake Moody. There is where Lynch's belief really shined through. We have belief in Jake that he will rise to the top, even if the 49ers bring in kicking competition. Lynch mentioned belief in Moody multiple times. Just 3 times I see the word belief or believe in this 3-graph excerpt from my article up on the San Francisco Standard. And at a certain level, psychologically, I think that's the right type of leadership that the 49ers have to bring to the table. You have to continue to broadcast belief in Moody, because kicking, as we know, it's a big-time head game. And if there's not belief coming in from the front office, well, that could screw Jake Moody up even further. I think that the high ankle sprain, even though he might have been physically recovered from it at the time that he did return, there probably was another step of mental recuperation, psychological recuperation that needed to happen after the high ankle sprain. And obviously, Jake Moody did not bridge that gap. The really thorny part of all this is that the kickers have been screwed up mentally by far less than a high ankle sprain like this. So you can say, yes, this was because of the injury, but then you have to answer, well, what is the kicker going to do about it? What is the team going to do about it moving forward? Because just because something happened due to injury doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be fixed once a certain amount of time has passed. Moody's going to have to overcome whatever hurdle there is. The 49ers acknowledge that they've been flummoxed by this situation, and the best way to move forward is to insulate themselves while not burning an unnecessary bridge. There have been countless examples of talented kickers, and we know that Moody's a talented kicker. We've seen the leg strength. We've seen the accuracy, especially over his time at Michigan, but even his rookie season for the 49ers, he knocked through 84% of field goals and then 14 of 15 to open the 2025 season. I mean, we've seen the talent. Kicked for Jim Harbaugh in college, and Harbaugh said there are 3 things you can count on in life: death, taxes, and Jake Moody. So he saw it with his own eyes. The 49ers scouted him, and they saw it through that workout. Unfortunately for them, it took a turn for the worse after he got hurt in October last year. And they are holding out belief that Jake Moody can turn it around at really no downside at this point by keeping him on the roster. But it will be fascinating to see who the 49ers might bring in as kicking competition over the course of this offseason, as they do look to insulate themselves at what's a very important position, because we do know that special teams was completely horrific for the 49ers last season. I even wrote this whole article about it up on the San Francisco Standard. The 49ers don't screw it up mentality on special teams has done exactly that. Check out this illustration. It's Jake Moody kicking with Brant Boyer, the new special teams coordinator, watching. Boyer obviously has not had a chance to do that quite yet, but that's what the illustration is for. So that's the John Lynch update from yesterday on Jake Moody. The 49ers are proceeding the way that they should in this situation. Calmer heads have prevailed. If you let Twitter, if you let social media, maybe even the YouTube comment section run this, you have just cut Jake Moody yesterday, and you would have gained absolutely nothing from it. The 49ers can bring in another kicker. They can see how Jake Moody responds, and they do remember how well he kicked in 2024 before that high ankle sprain. So maybe all their consulting with soccer teams and trying to figure out what exactly went wrong, maybe that will pay off now that they have some time to help Jake Moody get back on track. Following what John Lynch said was a very candid discussion, a very open discussion, an honest discussion with Jake Moody about his struggles in 2024. All right, that's your update. Got more coming up on the salary cap a little bit later. The NFL has set it at $279.2 million for the 2025 season. That is an increase of about 9.3% over the number in 2024. All in all, over the past two seasons, the salary cap has increased about 24.1% from $224.8 million in 2023 to $255.4 million in 2024 to $279.2 million in 2025. All told, this leaves the 49ers with about $60 million in salary cap space for the 2025 cycle. That is on a 53-man roster projection that I've made. Here's a look at the salary caps as they've grown over the years. The 24.1% increase is significant over the past 2 years, to say the least. Yes, it does play into potential contract maneuverings with Brock Purdy, contract machinations for the 49ers as a whole. But we also have to look at the cash spent by San Francisco. How much is Jed York willing to continue to pour into the team? That's obviously related to the salary cap situation, but it is not fully tied to it. And yesterday, when I talked about John Lynch and his comments about cash spent and restraining spending this offseason, it's clear that there are some more complicated dynamics at play with the 49ers and how they're going to construct this roster in 2025. But I can tell you that this team has the 60 or so million in salary cap space right now on a 53-man cap projection. Share it with you right here. 61.57 million is the number. This is my salary cap sheet, which should come in very useful for those of you following the 49ers and what they might do financially this season. But there does seem to be a concerted effort to streamline costs, to be more efficient, to make sure that they can replicate their 2024 success in the NFL draft in 2025. Because even if that costs less money, you could look through NFL history, especially in the salary cap era. That's actually the most effective way to build a winning team, because this is a young man's sport, and the 49ers had the oldest team in football last year as they were circling the wagons trying to go for that revenge tour. I know they called 2020 the revenge tour, but it felt like 2024 had the same type of theme. They lose in overtime at the Super Bowl. They try to keep the gang together. They spend a lot of money trying to do it. Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk in the offseason, but they fell flat on their face. So the non-cost efficient way of doing business, the splurging way of doing business, didn't quite yield the results the 49ers wanted, mainly because of a lot of those injuries in 2024. And now, and this is, they tried to do both last season. Obviously, the draft class was extremely important, and it looks like they really hit on that draft class, from Pearsall to Pooney to Renardo Green to Malik Mustafa, Isaac Garendo, even Jacob Cowing showed some flashes for the 49ers. So a lot of good cost-controlled names there for San Francisco, but they need to do that again as they continue to financially settle this roster, make sure they can stay salary cap sustainable far into the future. This was the article yesterday. John Lynch, no guarantees. That was the line that stood out to me, because it means that he is digging in, and the 49ers are digging in for what might be a tough negotiation with Brock Purdy. Obviously, that resets the entire spectrum potentially for the 49ers, right? You've got Purdy set to make what? It could be a contract worth several $100 million in the long run. We can talk about the APY forever, whether it's $55 million, $60 million, or something more creative than that, but it's still going to be the biggest dent in 49ers the 49ers bank account in their franchise history. They're going to give Brock Purdy a franchise record contract. And because of that, in a salary cap league, you've got to build the team differently around him. You have to make sure that the tweaks that are necessary or the big changes that are necessary to make a roster sustainable over the long run are there. So Lynch talked about it yesterday. The no guarantees line stood out. I delve into that up on the San Francisco Standard. And then here, this is my salary cap look with the new salary cap set at $279.2 million. A lot of short-term space for the 49ers, but remember, unused space carries over from year to year, and they have to be prudent with the fiscal management moving forward because they've put so much money into void years moving forward. They have to continue surfing that salary cap wave. All right. We'll talk to everybody soon. That's the plan, and that's the reason for belief in Jake Moody. 49ers covering their bases with Jake Moody. No reason to be outraged about that. They're doing exactly what they should be doing in that situation, and they are operating under that $279.2 million salary cap. That is your 49ers morning update. We'll talk to you soon.